Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Mr. Fix-It channel. Got the Polaris 400L in the shop again today, and we're going to test the stator. Stay tuned.
I was sitting out there in the shed one evening, not doing too much of nothing, just kind of staring at the wall.
So at the end of this video, I will post up the flowchart and the specs directly out of the manual, so stay tuned for that too. So what we're going to do here is we're going to test the stator and the charging system. This is a viewer request. Thank you for that. And in order to get to these wires, some of the wires are right here, but the other wires we need to get to are underneath this red cowling. So we got to remove this red cowling and we'll get to them wires. We'll get our voltmeter out and we'll start testing things. So let's get into this. Alright, so the first thing we want to do here is we want to test the battery voltage. So I got my meter set to volts DC, and I'm just going to put my leads on the battery here. And we're going to test the voltage of the battery. 12.4, that's acceptable. Okay, now we're going to start the engine and we're going to recheck the battery voltage. It should come up from the 12.4 volts. So we'll get this started up here. Okay, we got 12.5, 12.6, 7. Now we got to rev the engine up between 3,000 and 4,000 RPMs, and we should see a voltage between 13 and 14.5, but not over 15. And just be advised, do this in a well ventilated area. So I'm going to have to open my door and let this smoke out before we continue. Alright, so if your battery charging system is working in this manner to where you have good battery voltage, and when you start it up and rev it, the voltages is between those ranges of 13 and 14.5, but not above 15 and not below 13, and the engine runs fine, then you don't really have any problems. But if that's not the case, we're going to continue. We're going to test the ohms, the resistance, through the wiring to the stator, and we're going to check and make sure that the wiring is intact and the stator coils are intact, and we'll check some other things which we got to get underneath here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this red piece off here, and all the wiring's in this area. So let me get this off of here and then we'll continue. So the next thing we want to do is we want to start checking continuities and ohms resistances in the stator wires. So we're going to find the yellow and the yellow-red. By the way, this is where your voltage regulator rectifier lives on this machine. It's up here behind the bumper. So yellow and yellow-red, and we want to make sure we have the wires going to the stator, not the ones going to the rectifier regulator. I'm going to switch my meter to ohms, and we're going to test between these wires, and this reading should be 0.3, and in the manual says that we can be within 10% of that. So sometimes you got to hold these leads in a manner to where you get a consistent reading, because these machines are getting quite old now. So that's reading 0.6. That's a little bit more than it should be, 0.5. I'm going to say that's acceptable because my charging system's working just fine. So the next one we're going to do is we're going to go between the yellow and the yellow-brown wire. So we've already got that one unplugged. We'll find the yellow-brown here. And we'll go between the yellow and yellow-brown. And this should be around 0.2 ohms. So 0.4, 0.3. So that's acceptable. If it was 0, then you would have a problem, or if it was 10, you would definitely have a problem. So 0.3 I'm going to say is acceptable, even though in the manual says you only get 10%, but my like I said, my charging system's working, so I'm going to say that's acceptable. So the next thing we're going to test, we're going to go to volts DC. We're going to unplug the red wire coming off the regulator, and I'm going to put my red lead and the red wire, and I'm going to go to ground. I'm just going to use this bolt right here, and we should have battery voltage here, 12.5. Now I'm going to unplug this black wire, and I'm going to go back to ohms, and we should see continuity from the black wire to ground. Okay, that checks out. Let's plug that one back in. Okay, the next wires we want to test is up here, and we want to find the harness that has the black, red, and the red wire in it. We're going to unplug this, and we want to make sure we get the harness side and not the CDI box side, because the other side goes directly to the CDI box. So we're going to test across here in ohms. We should see around 230. So I got 245, so that's good. Now we want to get the white with red and white wires. And we're going to go across here. We're going to see somewhere around 100 ohms. So I got 123 ohms there. So I'm going to say that's an acceptable range. The manual says 10% plus or minus. Mine are all a little more than 10% on the plus side. But everything's working here, so I'm going to say that's acceptable. Once you've tested all these ohms and everything checks out and you still don't have charging, we're going to test between all these wires and the chassis for ground. So if any of these wires are grounded out, that's going to cause a no charge problem. So I'm going to keep this on ohms, and I'm going to go to the red wire. And again, I'm just going to use this bolt here. There should be no continuity. So the number shouldn't change. It should stay open leak. So nothing there. Test the other one. Nothing there. And we're going to go to the white and white red. Nothing there. Make sure you kind of scratch these and wiggle them around a little bit, because you might not be making contact with your meter lead. So just make sure you got making good contact with these. So nothing there. Okay, the next wires we want to test, I'm going to unplug this yellow one, and we're going to go from here to ground. And there should be zero continuity here. Nothing there. Yellow with red, nothing there. And the yellow with brown, nothing there. Okay, that all checks out. Now if you have an auto ranging meter like mine, you want to make sure you set this to ohms, because you can set this to mega ohms or kilo ohms and you might get a reading and that might throw you off. So make sure you set your range to its lowest setting. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 200 ohms. Mine has auto range features, so don't let that throw you off. Okay, this next test, we're going to unplug the yellow and yellow red. We're going to hook our red lead up to the yellow and our black lead up to the yellow with red. We're going to configure our multimeter to run amps test. So you got to move the red one over to where it says 10 amps, and you're going to set your amp meter to AC amperage. I've got my maximum amperage meter right up here in the top right corner, and it should read a minimum of 5 amps at idle. Don't rev the engine or anything, just start it up, let it idle, and as long as it's more than 5 amps, you're good. So only run this test for just a few seconds to get your reading, because you don't want to blow the fuse in your meter. Okay, 12.4 amps from the charging system. Okay, so what are some of the issues that you can try to figure out and resolve? So this red wire we tested earlier, this one goes through an auto reset breaker to the starter relay, the starter solenoid. You should have 12 volts here because this is connected directly to the battery. If you don't, then you need to trace it back to this circuit board, and I'll put up I'll show you what this looks like. In the red section there should be, that wire runs up here to the red, and then another red wire runs from here all the way back to the starter relay. In between there is an auto reset circuit breaker. If the auto reset circuit breaker isn't working, then you won't have headlights or dash lights, nothing like that's going to work. The starter won't even work. So let that be a clue. It could be the auto reset. Alright, I'm out here at my parts quad, and I just wanted to show you what this breaker looks like. This is what's inside this little bubble pack here. This is an auto reset breaker. So anytime you have a short in a wiring system, this is going to trip and kill power between these two terminals here. This one goes to the starter relay right there. The other one goes up here to the circuit board in the red section, which is right there. Now if you had any continuity between these wires and ground, then you have a bare wire somewhere in the stator. So any of these wires are shorted to ground, that's going to cause charging issues. And if it's any of these wires that are shorted to ground, you're going to have running issues. It may not even start. So you want to pull your gas tank and check that wiring goes all the way down into the engine for the stator. You may even have to go as far as pull this side apart, get this cover off of here, pull the flywheel, and inspect the stator itself. Now if you don't have continuity between these, but the resistance measurements were way off, you may want to check, you may want to go ahead and pull all that on that side apart and look at the stator, because there could be some actual physical damage to it, and there could be some melting of the wires where something overheated because something was shorted out. So if your charging system's still not working and your readings for your specifications of these are off, you definitely want to do a visual inspection. So pull that side of the engine apart and look at the stator. So this is the flywheel, and on the inside of the flywheel there is a series of magnets, and they're polarized and opposite, so you can have north, south, north, south. These magnets can come unglued, delaminate off of this, and they will stick themselves to the iron core of the stator, and it will chew everything up inside here. So if that happens, your engine's not even going to run at all, let alone charge. So if you're having that kind of an issue and you've tested all this and you're getting some off numbers, definitely pull this flywheel off and inspect these magnets. Also, while you're in there, make sure they're good sticky magnets, because they can lose their magnetism over time, which would cause poor engine performance and low charging voltage. So make sure they're good sticky magnets. Okay, there's 4 different circuits in this stator, and we can see the ones that we tested. So there's the black, red, and red. There's the white with white, red. Here's the 3 yellow wires that we were testing. So you want to inspect these coils. If you see any heat damage in these coils, so a little bit of explanation here. This is magnet wire. So if you look up the term magnet wire, that'll tell you that's what this is. It's a copper wire, and it's coated in a lacquer so that it doesn't make continuity against itself. It looks like it's bare, but it's actually not even bare, and they do that so they can wrap this wire really tightly around the iron core. They're wrapped on these posts, and you have 4 different circuits. So you're going to have your exciter circuit, then you're going to have 2 lighting charging circuits in here, and you're also going to have the pulse circuit. Now the pulsar picks up, if you look at the flywheel, so if we look at the flywheel, and while this is installed in the engine, this pulsar sits on the engine case right next to this embossment on the flywheel, and every time that embossment moves past this Hall effect sensor, it will create a tiny voltage and send it to the CDI box, and that tells the CDI box where top dead center is. So if this is faulty, you're not going to have any spark. The exciter, this coil here, this coil charges the CDI box. This is what gives the CDI box its energy to create a spark. So if this is bad, you're going to have a weak spark or no spark. All these here are the 2 charging lighting circuits. So as the magnets whiz past here, it's creating a voltage in these, and the copper wire sends it up to the regulator rectifier. So that's how this system works. So you want to inspect these. You want to look for any bare wires, like that right there. Any bare wires that could be touching ground somewhere, or touching 2 wires that are bare that are touching 2 adjacent wires. So you want to inspect this entire wiring harness. Usually any bare wires are going to be inside the engine. There might be some up here at this end, but usually these wires through here are fine, but definitely check it. Anywhere this wiring harness is touching something, that's where you want to check it for wear. It could be chafed off and shorted out. So you definitely want to inspect all the wiring inside the stator loom. That's why we test from these wires to ground to make sure nothing is shorted. Now if you have a very low ohms reading, it's probably because either this got melted, this lacquer on this got melted because this got hot because of a short or because the regulator went bad. There's several reasons why this would overheat, but it will melt the lacquer off, and these wires inside here will actually make contact with each other, and it will cause a low ohms reading. Now if you was testing these wires, especially these yellow wires here, and you didn't get any ohms readings, then more than likely one of these wires is broke. So you can see how the wires come into the stator there, and they go and they start wrapping around this thing. If any of these wires break, then that's going to cause a very high resistance. So if it's supposed to be 230 ohms and you're getting 700 ohms, then there could be a break on one of these wires in here. So you may have to go in pretty deep to test the stator if your numbers are off. Usually it's going to be pretty straightforward. You're either going to have continuity or not. But like I said, if these wires get hot and they melt together, then it's going to reduce the charging effect of your stator. It could reduce it to the point where there is no charging effect whatsoever. Well, I hope this helped you guys out. Like I said, I'll put the flowchart and the spec sheet from the manual at the end of this video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and don't be afraid to fix it. And if you have any other video recommendations you'd like me to do, please leave them down in the comments. Thanks for watching.